We are in the 12th century. The place, not very far from here.
Svein and his men went to the farmstead and looted everything they could lay their hands on. Then they set fire to the house, burned everyone inside to death.
Orkney has for thousands of years proved attractive to travellers. Many of them ended up staying here. When the Vikings began to come here from Norway more than 1,000 years ago, they brought with them their families, livestock and household goods, their social customs and language. Over a period of 3 centuries, they made the islands a part of the expanding Scandinavian world. Orkney was ideal as a base for expanding the empire and became a Norse colony. Everywhere they went in the British Isles, Vikings came across the Christian religion. They soon gave up their old gods like Odin and Thor to follow the White Christ. The change in religion had a great knock-on effect on cultural life. The Vikings' simple runic alphabet was replaced by the Latin alphabet, and they acquired the new technology of writing, quill pens, inks made from vegetable dyes, and animal skin parchment. Writing caught on most of all in Iceland. The new Icelanders busily forged a whole new literary tradition based on their own culture and memories of the illustrious Viking past. They preserved the oral poetry of the Viking age. They wrote down tales and lore of the old gods, of the turmoils of the Viking age, and of their own making of a nation far out in the North Atlantic. In particular, they celebrated their own past in the famous sagas of Icelanders, realistic but fictionalized accounts of the feuds and conflicts among the new settlers. Today, these are among the classics of world literature.
There was a man called Kettle Flatnose, the son of Bjorn Buna. He was a powerful chieftain in Norway and came from a distinguished family. Towards the end of Kettle's days, King Harold came to power, so that no local king or other great man could prosper without his patronage. Kettle prepared to leave the country and go west across the sea.
All sagas have these genealogies, sections which introduce people who are going to come into the story and tell you about their relationship to each other. The original audiences would have recognized names from other sagas and would especially have enjoyed hearing their own ancestors mentioned.
Gro was the mother of Greyland, who was married to Earl Thorfinn, the son of Earl Torfeinar, the son of Ronald, Earl of Mold.
This genealogy comes from the Laxdæla saga, one of the great Icelandic family sagas.
And these people are the ancestors of all the Earls of Orkney.
These sagas tell of the deeds of great men, such as the kings of Norway and the Earls of Orkney. Here at Orford, nearly 900 years ago, Earl Harold prepared to entertain his brother, Earl Paul. When 2 earls shared the one earldom, it was one earl too many.
Það var of daga þeirra bræðra Haralds, Jarls og Páls að þeir skyldu taka jólaveislu í Örfjöru að búi Haralds Jarls og skyldi hann þeim halda kostin fyrir.
It was in the days of the brothers, the Earls Harold and Paul, that a Christmas feast was arranged on Earl Harold's estate at Orford. The Earl was busy with the preparations. Their mother Helga and her sister Fracog were getting on with their needlework when Earl Harold came into the room. A newly made linen garment, white as snow and stitched in many places with gold thread, was lying between them. Whose is this treasure?
It's meant for your brother, Paul.
Why take such pains making clothes for him? You're not so particular when you make one.
He cast his tunic off, and he began unfolding the linen gown.
Harold, you've no reason to be envious just because Paul has some fine clothes.
Harold snatched it back, and was about to put it on when the women pulled off their bonnet and tore their hair.
If you put on that garment, your life will be in danger. Harold, you give me that. No trouble will happen if
after that, he died. His death was deeply mourned by his friends. And immediately after Harold's death, his brother Paul took over the entire earldom with the approval of every farmer in Orkney.
But the saga soon brings in another contender, a cousin. Ronald Colson had been brought up in Norway, where King Harold encouraged him to try his luck. Ronald, attacking from Shetland, needed the support of the three leading men on the crucial island of Westray. There was Helgi, who lived in the harbour village we know today as Pirowall, and Kupi of Ratness in the south. The third was Thorkel the Flare, who almost certainly lived at Tukoi, where, as at Orford, there was a splendid church next to the farmstead. The support of Thorkel the Flare proved decisive, and Westray went over to Ronald. Now we meet Sven as Leifrson, the great maverick adventurer of the saga. Paul had a powerful supporter in Sigurd of Westness in Rousey. Paul and his men were being feasted there when the unthinkable happened.
Early in the spring, Sven as Leifrson had put out from the Hebrides and had sailed to see his friends in Scotland. There he learned about the fighting in Orkney, so he decided to set sail in a cargo boat for Rousey. They came to a large, rocky headland.
Some people are there on the headland. Let's put in and find out what's happened. Spread out the sleeping bags. 20 of us will get into them. The other 10 will row towards the shore. Let's go very quietly.
When they came closer to the headland, the men on the shore shouted for them to row on to Westness and give Earl Paul whatever they had on board, thinking that they were some merchants. Earl Paul had got up early after the feast at Sigurd's and gone to hunt an otter. His party were about to go back to the house for a drink when the men on the cargo boat rowed up to the shore asking for the Earl. The men said he was there with them. Sven and the others lying in their sleeping bags heard this and told them to put them out of sight of the headland, saying they should arm themselves and kill the Earl's men as soon as they could, which is what they did, killing 19 men there, though 6 of Sven's men were killed too. They took Earl Paul by force and led him back to the boat. Then they sailed the same way back, west to mainland, right between Hoy and Grimsey, then east of the Pentland Firth, into the Murray Firth, and up to the river White.
We don't know what Sven did with the Earl. There were various ugly rumours, but this much is known, that Earl Paul never came back to Orkney, so Ronald came to power. Magnus was the holiest of the Orkney Earls, but the saga names his grandfather Thorfinn as the most powerful. To win power, he too had to eliminate a rival, Einar, who was killed for him by his henchman Thorkel of Dearness. The saga describes how this happened in the drinking hall at Hlaupandanes, which is the present-day farm of Scale on the road to the Gloop and Malhead.
Thorkel the Foster was to be reconciled with Earl Einar and become his friend. The stipulation was that they should hold feasts for each other. The first time would be Thorkel's, and he invited Earl Einar to Sandwich near Dearness. Einar came to the feast, but despite the lavish hospitality, he was in a sour temper. On the last day, he got ready to leave. Thorkel was supposed to travel with him to the other feast, but when he sent his men to spy out the route to be travelled later in the day, they reported armed men in ambush at 3 different spots. Thorkel delayed his departure and called his men together. A fire was burning on the floor. Thorkel came in through one of the doors, accompanied by an Icelander called Halvard, who closed the door behind him.
Aren't you ready yet? Yes, I'm ready now.
Thorkel struck him on the head, and the Earl fell forwards into the fire.
I've never seen such a useless lot. pull the Earl out of the fire.
The Icelander hooked his curved axe round the back of the Earl's neck and heaved him up onto the wooden platform. Then he and Thorkel ran out through the other door, where Thorkel's men were waiting, fully armed.
When this happened, Thorfinn was only 15, but ambitious. He went on to rule for a further 45 years and was said to be the most powerful of all the earls of Orkney. He won 9 Scottish earldoms, the whole of the Hebrides, and a considerable part of Ireland. In the words of Arner, the Earl's poet,
Björt verður sól að svartri, sökkur fold í mardöggvan.
The bright sun will blacken, heaven's bowl break asunder, earth sink in dark seas, mountains soar through ocean. Ere the islands bear another like Thorfinn, help him, heaven, this hero.
but Thorfinn was remembered also for the lavishness of the feasts and drinking bouts with which he rewarded his followers. These were the men who took drinking seriously. There was a code of honour about it. Let us return to the saga in the last days of Earl Paul. Sven Asleeperson, who kidnapped the Earl from the Rousey shore, was an uneasy Yuletide guest of the Earl's, and a jealous accusation of unfair drinking soon led to trouble.
There was a great drinking hall at Orkney, and just a few paces down from it stood a fine church. On the left, as you come into the hall, was a large stone slab with a lot of big ale vats behind it, and opposite the door was the living room. Whenever people came back from the church service, they were led to their seats. Earl Paul had Svein Asleeperson placed next to him. Svein Breslin sat opposite him with his kinsman. Even Mel Brinderson served the two Sveins from two separate vessels, while the cupbearers and boy attendants stood in front of the Earl's table. Svein Breslin got the idea that his cup was being filled up more than that of Svein Asleeperson's.
You are even taking Svein Asleeperson's cup before he finishes it. Asleeperson, you're not paying fair at the drinking.
After they had carried on drinking for some time, they went to church for the afternoon service of nuns, before coming back to drink more toasts.
Let's exchange drinking horns, to be fair.
Abram gave a large horn to Svein Asleeperson, who offered it to the other Svein.
But this is even larger. Still, you do not drink fairly. Svein will kill Svein, and Svein shall kill Svein.
Earl Paul and Svein Asleeperson went into the inn.
A quiet word with you, Asleeperson. Did you hear what Breslin said when you handed him the horn?
No, I didn't.
He means to kill you, all right. So make sure you're the first to get a blow in and kill him.
Abram gave him an axe, telling him to stand in the shadow of the stone slab, to strike Svein from the front if his kinsman walked ahead, but from the back if he walked behind. The Earl went to church. Svein Breslin and his kinsman followed. Svein Breslin had a sword in his hand. His kinsman was walking ahead. There was a light at the door, but it was very dark outside, and as Svein Breslin reached the outer door, Svein Asleeperson struck him on the forehead. He stumbled a little but didn't fall, and as he straightened up, he saw someone standing in the doorway. He assumed this must be the one who had wounded him. He struck him on the head, splitting it open, right down to the shoulders. But it was his kinsman, and both of them fell to the ground. At that moment, Avon came up, took Svein Asleeperson into the room opposite the entrance, and had him pulled outside through a skylight. Horses were ready, and he fled. They boarded a ship and went to the stronghold on Dapsey. Next morning, he was taken north to Bishop William on Eggleston.
This was typical of Sven. He was forever stirring up trouble and then having to run away from it. His luck lasted through many more years, but in the end, Sven died on an expedition to Dublin. The Orcadians loved telling stories of the adventures of Sven the Sleeperson, and one day these stories reached the ears of an Icelandic tourist to the islands. Back home in Iceland, the stories about Sven, the account of the life, death and miracles of St. Magnus, and the poetry about the deeds of earls such as Thorfinn and Ronald provided the raw materials for the unknown compiler of Orkney Saga, the saga of the Orkney Islanders, first put together in about the year 1200, probably at Oddi, at that time one of the most important literary places in Iceland. For the Icelanders, the history of the Orkney Islands, from where many of them came, was their history too. In those days, Icelanders and Orcadians still spoke the same language, but gradually Iceland began to look more and more towards Norway and Orkney towards its southern neighbour Scotland. The cultural links between Orkney and Iceland were eventually broken, but we still have the saga today to remind us of the time when Orkney was a part of the Norse world, and when its links with that world ensured that its story was told.